it's time to talk about Brown. The biggest thing that we were really alluding to before we went to the break was that somebody's got to come out of this lineup that just started to have a lot of success with the insertion of the Marcuses. We said Hayward may be playing his way in, especially after the aggressive performance on Saturday night. But then also we've got Jaylen Brown, who's been a staple last year in the starting lineup, really has almost this entire season until starting to deal with this little minor nagging injury that he's had. And if he comes back, it's hard to see him. I know we've seen him play the 4 a little bit, but it's hard to see him playing the 4 where Marcus Morris is at right now. So then I really feel like the decision is coming down to, do you put Brown back in, or do you let Marcus continue to feed this energy and enthusiasm and make winning plays and create opportunities for others without needing the ball in his hands? And maybe Brown's better suited for that bench unit for a while to be able to attack the basket. He was getting very aggressive before the injury. One of the only guys to really start hitting the rim. I know we talked about that in the first half as being one of the things that was a significant improvement for this club. And Brown was kind of leading the charge outside of Kyrie before he went down. So how do you slice this one? Does he earn his way back in? Do they just give it to him and put Marcus back on the bench? Or do you kind of have to not mess with the success that Marcus Smart has brought to the starting lineup?
I'm probably of the mode that 3 games is not enough to really make a change right now. I think Jaylen, I worry about Jaylen's ability to react to being on the bench. Remember when you and I were doing shows his rookie year and having conversations about how much better he plays when he was in the starting lineup. There was a period when Avery Bradley was out for an extended spell, and he really kind of stood up and played much better in that starting position. And so I wonder what we're going to get from Jaylen coming back. I think personally, the culture that the Celtics have initiated and established in that starting unit, and really it's continuing through the rest of the into the bench and through the seat throughout the 48 minutes of the game. It's great. Now we're going to introduce another wing player who's going to take minutes. And you look at the minutes distribution the last night. I think Alex Kungu put it out there on Twitter. Where do you take the minutes from? It's going to be hard to find minutes for Jaylen Brown. That's the hard part about this. Is now we got to fit him in. And in terms of game, how does he fit with the other players he's in? I think if you leave Hayward on the bench and you go with the Rozier, Brown, Hayward, either Tice or Baines, and then probably one of the other starters kind of cycling back through, I think it's okay. If you move Hayward back to the starting group, and let's say Morris comes back, then I get a little antsy about that. And I know, you're going to have one of probably Horford or Irving or Hayward with that second unit. But I just, what I like about Hayward being on that second unit is his ability to play make and create opportunities for others. And I think if they move Hayward out of that, it may not establish that ethic quite yet. I'd like to see maybe Brown in that second unit. I worry about his head. I worry about him being able to be locked and keep that progress going like we saw pre-injury. But Jaylen's your guy. I'm gonna.
Well, I've gotten softer on that.
I want to hear what your thoughts are, because I'm curious whether or not you think he can mentally get there.
Well, I've gotten soft on him a little bit. That's on that whole stance for sure. And obviously I'm still a big Brown supporter, but the issue is, for me, that Brown, to your point, doesn't necessarily do very well off the bench. I almost feel like they kind of just need to rotate some nights off for some of these guys if they could get away with it. I mean, I know we're worried a little bit about chemistry, but I think one of the biggest impactors on chemistry today is just the lack of minutes, as you just mentioned. And like Alex Kungu said, where does these minutes come from? How do we manage those minutes? I almost feel like you just let guys have a night off here and there. And rotate it through. Let them come back in. The only other thing I'll say about that with Brown is I feel like he was heating up before the injury, so it's a little bit hard to make this next statement. But part of me thinks you put him on the bench and just say, listen, things are going well. things are going really well. We got to stay with this for a little while. And you kind of let that be the impetus that when he comes back in as the starter, so that he never wants to go back, right? Because that's probably the psychology over the last couple of years. And then once he gets out there, I mean, some of it we decided was related to being around other players that were taking attention away from him. And if it's simply that, there's enough talent on this team, especially if Hayward's on that bench unit with him, or in that bench rotation with him, that he really could still benefit as much as he has in starting lineups of past years. So I think maybe if that's really all it is, if there's also just a mental motivation thing for him, it might not be bad and it won't hurt the team for him to sit on the bench a little bit so that when he comes back in as a starter, he really values it and does not relinquish his hold on that position